Did you know that fintech plays a role in creating a sustainable Earth? At our MIT FinTech Club, we believe that technology is a powerful tool that will accelerate world developments, whether it be in the fields of finance, education, healthcare, agriculture, or especially sustainable development. According to the United Nations, digital technologies will directly advance about 70% of SDGs in critical areas like climate change and waste management. This is made possible with the developments of core technologies like AI, IoT, blockchain, robotics, 5G, etc. Along with these trends is the emergence of a nascent field called sustainable finance. Our guest today is an expert on sustainable finance. He worked at various places across the world before coming to Vietnam, where he founded AQUILA.is, an IoT-powered sustainable finance platform, and is the company's current president. His experience doesn't just stop at the private sector, because he also is currently a board member of the European Chamber of Commerce, Vietnam, and is the chairperson of the Sustainable Finance Sector Committee. So it is my honor to have you, Mr. Giando Zappia, onto our podcast today, and I am beyond excited to have you here today and to learn a lot from you. So with that, please welcome Mr. Giando.
Thank you for the invite, Jung.
So I've introduced you a little bit, but I kind of want to hear from your perspective. So can you briefly introduce about yourself and what it is that you do?
Sure. So first of all, I'm Italian. I'm from Sicily, and I have been in the region for 13 years. I started my journey in Indonesia. We're perhaps gonna get to that later on. I currently am the president of Aquila, which I co-founded 2 years ago, and we are an IoT-powered technology company that is revolutionizing sustainable finance. And at the same time, as you mentioned, I am the board member of EuroCham and chairing the Sustainable Finance Sector Committee. Glad to be here and to engage in this conversation.
Right, awesome. So I've browsed a little bit on your LinkedIn profile, and it says that, there were a lot of things on your LinkedIn profile, but your experiences and education background spans a lot of countries. Mm-hmm. So you've studied in Italy and the United States briefly, and you've worked for various countries in Singapore and Indonesia. Now you're Aquila, and I assume that Aquila is in Vietnam. Am I correct?
Correct.
Right, it's Vietnamese based, and you're also the board member of EuroCham, which is also based in Vietnam.
Correct.
So I'm really curious about what your motivation is for coming to Vietnam as the place where you're currently developing professionals.
Sure. To be able to give you this, I might go back in time and tell you when I was a student.
Right, please.
And
definitely.
I was studying in the US. It was 2011, the time of the shale gas revolution, which completely made a new landscape of the energy sector worldwide.
Right.
With the United States being able to become a net exporter of oil and gas from being a net importer for more than 100 years.
Right.
And there I figured that energy being the base of human societies and of our economy was so important for me to understand how things work in this world.
Right.
My curiosity led me to finish my master's in law. I'm actually a law graduate, and wanting to enter the energy world, doing business.
Right.
And nowhere else would have given me a better opportunity than a market that was developing, that had a need for human capital, and that was endowed with great natural resources. And that was Indonesia.
Right.
So I decided to just fly to Indonesia and figure it out.
Right.
And Indonesia welcomed me well. I spent the first years working for the European Commission, helping companies to come into Indonesia. And when the time was right, I opened my first consulting company, helping different type of businesses with 7 partners in telecommunication, banking, energy, primarily, which was my interest, in investment in Indonesia. And with that, I caught a big fish, which was Enel, For those who don't know, Enel is the largest renewable energy player in the world outside China.
Right.
And the dream then was on because Enel decided to invest in Indonesia for a $300 million project. And I became part of the initial team that opened Southeast Asia. So I sold my company, I joined Enel, and I spent the past 7 years developing geothermal, hydroelectric, wind and solar project, as well as smart grids in Indonesia and then Vietnam. Right. And 2 years ago, I decided that my experience in the energy sector with a large corporation was over, and that I needed to do something new, something that would have challenged me once again. And that's when 𝗚𝗏𝗄𝗏 idea came to me, and now it's my day-to-day. It's a small climate tech with presence in 4 countries in Southeast Asia. And as I said, we're making a small revolution in sustainable finance.
Right. I would really love to hear more of your stories on 𝗚𝗏𝗄𝗏, but before that, I just want to... There is one curious question that I have, which is... So you mentioned earlier that you got your inspiration from when you were in the States, and you at the time you found that the energy sector was booming in the States, and yet from there you found the inspiration to study about energy law and the way the world works. Now, my understanding is that I think it's the fracking boom in the United States. Right, it's the fracking boom.
Yes.
Now, my understanding of fracking is that it's not as sustainable, let's say, as you may think it is, or that's probably my assumption.
That's correct.
Because it destroys some part of the land and contamination somewhat. So you got your inspiration from there. How did you kind of transition into the more sustainable development place?
So I like this question very much.
Right.
We need to go 1 second on the definition of sustainable development, which is a concept of law.
Right.
But is also embedded in economics.
Right.
And the definition of sustainable development from a legal perspective is guaranteeing the rights of the future generations to have the same rights of the current ones. From an economics perspective, it's the union of the economy, the environment, and equity in society.
Right.
When it comes to fracking or any other economic activity, there are externalities linked to it. An externality is an economic activity whose effect are not borne directly by who is producing them, but by another group of people.
Right.
Pollution.
Right.
If you pollute in today's world,
right,
in a river, you are not gonna be paying for it because the governments are struggling to put in place the right system for you to be accountable. All the farmers or the cities and the people that might have health issues that are downstream from your pollution will be paying for it. This is the same case for CO2 emission and climate change. That's why everybody talks about carbon tax. It's the only way for people who are emitting CO2 emission to be paying for the effect that the wider population is affected by. In fracking is the same. Oil companies were doing good profits by exporting the oil and the gas coming from these extraction practices, but the people in Pennsylvania who had earthquakes or had their drinking water infiltrated with pollutants did have to pay both with health and lack of access to basic commodities such as water. So fracking gave me the understanding of how the economics of the world related to nature and governments are being pushed through. And I saw a huge business opportunity because now that we are in the age of democratization of information and cheaper processing with AI and edge computing and great things that NVIDIA is doing with their technology, we're able to understand and process data at a pace that before was impossible. So even governments and businesses are now faced with new challenges and opportunities on making sense of this new data.
Right. So you got into the definitions of sustainable development a little bit, but I think what the audience certainly wants to hear from you is, what does sustainable finance mean, right? So we've all heard about SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, set by the United Nations, but what is sustainable finance? And like, can you give like a quick rundown of its definitions?
Sure.
Right.
So sustainable finance is the practice of embedding into the financial industry criteria for valuation that are linked to the physics of the world, which means, I'll give you an example.
Right.
One of the most important sectors of finance is the insurance business. In 2023, in the US, due to climate-related events, the insurance industry as a whole had a net loss of $50 billion because, and they are the most advanced statistician. They are capable of processing great amount of data. They calculate how many people die and how many people live in order to offer premiums that are accurately priced. So they're actually the best mathematician in the industry. And yet, because they didn't have yet the methodologies or technology to understand how the impact of flooding in Florida or of droughts in California with the wildfires or frosts in Texas would have affected the assets that they were insuring, they lost in 1 year $50 billion. You may understand that $50 billion is also another opportunity for somebody else who can provide this data to the same companies and take a margin on it. Same is for companies like banks that are lending money to real estate or agriculture that is affected by climate-related events, such as in the Mekong Delta, where farmers are losing the land to the sea rising, or manufacturing companies in the north of Vietnam that are affected by the blackouts due to heat waves. Those companies that are capable of predicting this phenomenon and giving the data to financial institutions who eventually bear the risk of their clients have a great opportunity in front of themselves. So this is what AQUILA is doing, and sustainable finance in short is embedding in the financial valuation of companies, valuation of risks that are not only linked to the economics of a company, but also linked to the physical world. That can be your consumption of water, electricity, waste, CO2 emissions, or even how you treat your workforce. Because it's proven that if you have a diverse board of directors, or you're training your workforce, or you're providing healthcare to your workforce, you will be performing better than your competitor. You as a bank, you want to know that because you are giving money to these people. You want to know which entrepreneur is more virtuous.
So can you talk just a little bit about the various aspects of sustainable finance? Because from my understanding is that it also extends to other instruments like green bonds, social impact bonds, green credits, etc. ESG investing. Can you just talk a little bit about, because I'm pretty sure that the audience would really love to know about that.
Sure, and maybe I can give you some use cases to touch it firsthand without too much theory. Think of a company that as a manufacturing company in Vietnam that is already saving electricity. They have already done some energy efficiency to save on their electricity bill. And they can go to the bank and say, we can commit that in the next 5 years, we are going to reduce our energy intensity, which is how much electricity you consume over your revenues, for example, by 5%. And I need a loan to buy a new machinery for my manufacturing process. Because I am committing to a non-financial KPI in my production, today I am eligible to have not a normal loan, but something that is sustainability linked. So it's a sustainability linked loan.
Right.
Which means that if my competitor asks a loan to the same bank and produces the same goods and is pretty much the same size, but does not have a commitment on reducing the electricity consumption and puts that commitment inside the covenants of a loan, it means that that competitor cannot have a sustainability linked loan. And a sustainability linked loan has a interest rate that is more competitive than a non-sustainable one. So
Right.
sustainable finance essentially is being able to access capital at a cheaper cost than a non-sustainability linked instrument. And this is for loans, which you may be familiar with, bonds. The market is actually very big, worldwide, bigger than loans.
Right.
And you can have it sustainability linked,
Right.
or linked to the use of proceeds, in which case is called green finance, or linked to social objectives, in which case is social finance,
Right.
linked to water infrastructure, in which case is called blue finance.
Right.
So everybody's coming up actually with different type of new products, as it happens when there is innovation. But the bottom line is sustainable finance is defined as provision of equity or debt
Right.
linked to sustainable KPIs,
Right.
which everybody now calls ESG.
Right. So I really wanted to know about your inspiration with starting AQUILA. And actually, perhaps this is a two-part question, which is, first of all, is what is your inspiration of coming to Vietnam and then starting AQUILA.is? And and after that, could you explain just a little bit about how AQUILA leverages IoT technology to addressing the issue of sustainable development and further advancing sustainable finance?
Okay, these are 5 questions. I
Okay,
will start
but
with 2.
perhaps
I will
I'll-
start with 2.
Right,
It's
right,
okay.
right,
No, I
right,
got
right.
them. I got
Right.
them. I got them. First, why Aquila? Why Vietnam?
Right.
Maybe I have answered partially this question earlier. There is a big market opportunity.
Right.
There is a need of data,
Right.
and there is cheaper technology out there to extract and provide the data.
Right.
Simple enough.
Right.
Why Vietnam? After many years around the region, living in Singapore, which is actually the financial hub of the region, I decided that Vietnam is the right place because finance, in a way, is a regulated market that can be assimilated to a utility. And I believe in the creation of data utilities in the future, where the government will control the data flows for economic activities. And there is no better place than a country where there is a centralized government that understands also very well the physics of the world. Vietnam has been since 1975 in the top 5 of mathematicians in the world. So there are very good, talented people here who are able to understand physics, chemistry, mathematics, and engineering. And the two things together make it the right place. Perhaps slower than other countries. I am very close to Indonesia. I've lived there for a long time. I speak the language. And perhaps in Indonesia, things are faster to take place. There is more creativity in a way, in the sense that people are left to make more mistakes. In Vietnam, there is some stigma about mistakes, but mistakes are needed to make things happen.
Right.
But at the same time, I believe the infrastructure of Vietnam is more solid. So long term, I bet on Vietnam to be able to deliver sustainable finance at scale earlier than any other country in ASEAN, perhaps after Singapore.
Right.
I hope in this way I answer to the second question.
Right.
You have to help me with the other 3.
Right. So the second question is, how does AQUILA leverage IoT technology, because
Okay.
you work primarily with IoT, right?
Yes,
How does it
yes.
leverage? Because I'm really interested in the intersection of technology, finance, and sustainable development. So how does it leverage IoT to advance sustainable financing?
Okay, so question for you. How do you define Internet of Things?
So my definition is that it's the interconnectedness of physical devices to the digital world.
Beautiful.
Right. That's my
Very good.
very brief,
It's perfect.
but shallow.
It's like
shallow,
Wikipedia grade. Amazing.
Right. Right.
Okay. But let's categorize it. It
Right.
can be your smart TV. It can be your phone.
Right.
Or it can be a tiny microchip with a sensor that you put next to your electricity meter,
Right.
or your water meter,
Right.
or a camera that with computer vision analyzes what's happening in its environment, which can be health and safety or quality control in a production line in a factory, or a scale to weight the amount of waste that is dumped on a platform. Everything that is, as you said, connected to the digital world is IoT. What Aquila does is integrating all these devices
Right.
and making sense of them in terms of sustainability reporting
Right.
for sustainable finance.
Right.
Because you have to provide a certain set of information to the financial institutions to access sustainable finance, either you hire consultants or you hire additional personnel in your organization to take all this information, put it in a spreadsheet, and provide it to the bank.
Right.
Or you have to have a digital infrastructure in accordance to international frameworks,
Right.
such as GRI or SASB or TCFD, so that the bank can process the data.
Right.
Aquila has this certification for provision of data to financial institutions.
Right.
We finance the installation of the devices.
Right.
If you are a factory or if you are a construction site for real estate. And we provide automation for the data extraction, consolidation, and reporting to financial institutions. And this is the bread and butter of our business. On top of it, because we have aggregated enough data in various industries, manufacturing, real estate, logistics, agri, we are now able to use artificial intelligence to benchmark the data and really be able to assess if the risk profile of one company compared to another company in another location are equal or different. And so refine the process of risk valuation that financial institutions really need to decide to whom giving money.
Right. So perhaps to kind of sum it up is you provide solutions in IoT, and it basically automates the process of extracting information, consolidating it, and creating a sustainability report to be sent to financial institutions to grant loans to, sustainability projects, factories, manufacturing facilities. Did I summarize that correctly?
Perfect.
So you mentioned a very important key word, which is a sustainability report. Perhaps this is my very vague understanding of the world, but in Vietnam, or at least from the time that I've been alive, or perhaps when I was very young, a lot of businesses didn't really care about sustainability as a concept, and let alone sustainability reports. Why are sustainability reports important to these projects? And have you ever seen like a case where, let's say, a project in your time working at Aquila, a project was turned down because it lacks a lot of these data in their sustainability reports? Right.
Okay. Why is a sustainability report relevant? If you ask a business owner, paying taxes is not a good thing.
Everyone agrees with that. Yeah, definitely.
But you also want to have hospitals for your children and schools.
Right.
and water in your home,
Right.
and an electric utility who provides electricity to your business to run so that you can make a profit, right?
Right.
So we all want public goods, but we don't want to pay for it.
Right.
A sustainability report is a classification of how a company uses public goods.
Right.
Water, electricity, production of waste, consumption of CO2 emissions. So today, in a world where we are able to process data at a scale that is unprecedented, we can put a price tag on pretty much everything. That's why if your competitor consumes more electricity than you per unitary output, you are gonna be probably doing better than your competitor. But you can know that only if you have a dollar amount associated with that saving that you're making.
Right.
So a sustainability report today is not only needed by companies to understand their performance, although they're seeing it only as a cost for the time being. It's mandatory in most cases. All stock listed companies in Vietnam already have to report on their sustainability KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
All companies that are exporting to Europe will have to report by 2025. And if you are in certain businesses like textile manufacturing or agriculture, various type, real estate, if today you don't have certain certification which are guaranteeing that you are sustainable in the way you make use of common goods,
Right.
you're out of the market, quite simply. If you don't have a Higg Index certificate, you cannot sell to Uniqlo.
Right.
If you don't have a Rainforest Alliance for cocoa, you cannot sell to Nestle. If you don't have a LEED certification for an office building, multinational companies are not gonna come and rent your space.
Right.
So, and this comes from their procurement rules. Why? Because they have targets to be more competitive with their peers.
Right.
So it's not only anymore the race about your bottom line on the dollar amount, but
Right.
it's also your bottom line on efficiency in water, electricity, the talent that you hire,
Right.
and other metrics that are non-financial.
Right.
The financial institutions today are finally considering to evaluate if you are actually a good company or not.
Right. If you're ESG positive or not, right?
I like the definition.
Right. So, then do you think then that this shift in the conscious of not only consumers but businesses, it comes from a sort of societal change in the way people feel about the environment, or do you think it's
I think it's about the law. To be honest, we knew
Okay.
about the effects of climate change, or we knew the effects of migration, or we knew the effects of competitiveness in the energy space for
Right.
sometimes centuries.
Right.
It's when governments start ruling that one thing is one thing and all the others are wrong, that businesses follow a certain direction.
Right.
If you would not need to pay taxes, you would not pay taxes.
Right.
Even though then you're gonna lack hospitals, schools, and other common good services.
Right.
So it's mostly driven by regulation.
Right. So it's the importance and the power of the law that shifts societal changes, right?
Correct.
Right. So I kind of want to ask about, just very briefly before we move on to more technical stuff, which is, I'm curious about, because I'm sure that a lot of our viewers want to be entrepreneurs, right?
All of them.
Well, we hope that all of them would one day.
Nobody wants to go in government.
Well, some would love to go into private sectors, but
Government?
perhaps some of them, I guess.
Go to government.
Yeah, so some of our club's alumni are working in the government, is as far as I know. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But I'm sure that the majority of them want to be entrepreneurs. So you in large way is an entrepreneur. You started your business. So I'm curious about like what was that process of starting Aquila like? What was like the initial stages, the initial struggles?
The continued struggle.
The continued struggle,
Yeah.
the current struggle. I'd really love to hear about that from your perspective.
Well, when I started it, it was very much of a idealistic aim of solving world's problems and having a fun journey doing it.
Right.
And I am lucky enough to say that even the excruciating day-to-day practice of maintaining a startup on its feet, delivering value to customers,
right,
and making sure that top talent that we have in our team remains committed to this journey is true to the premise of changing the world and
right.
having fun while doing it. The journey has started really when I got together with my two partners, Stefano and Jarek.
Right.
And now there is a fourth who joined us, Olli.
Right.
People do everything. I've been working on Aquila by myself for more than a year and a half. I went to Europe, I met bankers, I met top consultants, people in university, governments. I had all this amount of information. I understood the business opportunity, but until I found my partners, it wasn't real.
Right.
They gave legs. Each of us decided a role, and the partnership started delivering its fruits when each of us knew what the role was, what had to be delivered, what was the commitment towards each other, and we organized ourselves as a company.
Right.
We're all not first-time entrepreneurs. We are quite senior, so it's not a startup done on a whim. We have very good investors and clear path in front of us. But then I guess the problems for every company are the same. It's management of yourself first, and clear communication, default to action, accountability, and most of all having fun throughout the day. We have the fortune of having amazing people working with us. They're mostly Vietnamese, young, driven people, and they wouldn't stay with us if we would not be capable of delivering on the promises. So it's a fun journey. It's very tough. It's very hard. The team makes it possible every day.
Right. I love what you said there, which is in the initial stages, you worked alone by yourself before you had other co-founders joined in, then it became real, right? That's the value of having a strong and perhaps unified team when you're doing a startup, right?
That's fundamental. And the most important thing is to choose partners that are going to be able to push your boundary and complement you in ways where you have to shed your ego, where you grow compassion for the people around you so that you're able to take the right choices, especially during pressure time. And most of all, you want to work with people who have not only drive and passion and diligence, which are for granted, but you also want to have people with a good story.
Right.
Who have put meaning in all the things that they're doing personally and professionally. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fun.
Right. So find passionate, dedicated individuals to your team, and everything
good
will just
human
take
beings.
off. What? I'm sorry?
Good human beings.
Good human beings on your team, and everything will just take off.
Yes.
Right? So now I kind of wanted to go back into your Aquila technical side of it.
Yep.
So your solutions collect data. What kinds of data are you looking for? Like what kinds of data are, let's say, useful for the sustainability reporting that is like key for when bankers look at it and go, okay, this is a very ESG positive project?
So one project we've done here in Vietnam was to enable a $40 million green loan on for a
So
retailer.
it's dollars, right?
Dollars.
$14 million.
Dollars.
Right.
And we have enabled this by baselining the electricity consumption in the stores of the recipient of the investment in order to build solar rooftop
Right.
on each of these stores.
Right.
So the technology that we have used are power meters that are connected to the main electricity line.
Right.
This enabled us to reduce the electricity consumption by 35% and to reduce the full-time equivalent in the team of the owner by 3 people. So our technology is rather simple, but has a huge impact in the cost structure of a deal such as this green loan. Another one has been to design a monitoring, reporting, and verification digital system for the monitoring of a sustainability-linked loan in Singapore for $180 million, where we had to measure the electricity consumption and 4 different criteria of air quality: PMI, CO2, pressure, humidity. And these are criteria listed in the covenants of the loan. So there it was a more sophisticated IoT installation and software design for the extraction of the data and creating of an alert system for the banks that the client was respecting the criteria of the sustainability performance targets of the loan. So our tech deployment has been used for the pricing of these financial instruments.
Right. So beyond AQUILA, what other technology-driven green finance initiatives that you've seen that creates a meaningful impact similar to that of AQUILA creates? Have you others? It could be from your experiences from EuroCham in Indonesia, or from your experience of EuroCham in Vietnam as well.
Sure, there are a few cool examples that I have that we worked on for AQUILA.
Right.
Most of the people that we work with are at the edge of technology in
Right.
IoT, for example, in the measurement of wastewater from production facilities of a factory. We measure the quantity of the pollutants in order to quantify the cost for the local population, and we connect that to the price of a sustainability-linked loan. We have seen companies linking their entire operation in Vietnam. This is a big port operator that just recently issued a sustainability-linked loan with an international bank, connecting their CO2 emissions. But I have to say, by far the coolest one has been a $200 million sustainability-linked loan of a real estate group from Australia. This deal was done in Hong Kong, and they have committed to reduce their energy intensity, meaning revenues, CO2 emission over revenues, by 5% over the span of 3 years for a huge discount in their cost of capital. Which means, from a technological perspective, that you have to embed in all your buildings a huge number of sensors so that you can save electricity, making sure that nobody leaves the air conditioning on, that if there are no people in the room, the lights shut off, that the temperature level in the room is what you have set, that you are having a centralized air conditioning system. So technology-wise, you have to invest in energy efficiency in order to achieve these goals.
Right. So perhaps I kind of wanted to move on to questions relating to the Vietnamese landscape.
Yep.
So how do you see current sustainable finance initiatives uplift social values within the Vietnamese community, within the Vietnamese society?
The first one that I can think of is transparency.
Right.
In order to have a discount from a bank, you have to give more data. And I believe transparency is the cornerstone of a good society. So sustainable finance relies on transparent information, and companies that are disclosing are abiding to this, which I believe is a value. Same as for solidarity. If you're consuming less water, less electricity, you're allowing other parts of the population, especially the poor ones, to access to the same resource at a cheaper price. And finally, meritocracy, because if you are using natural resources more efficiently, you are rewarded by the system.
Right. So I want to talk about more specifically in Vietnam, what do you think might be the challenges, barriers to the advancement of sustainable finance or sustainable development as a whole? So whether it be like, could be come from a consumer's perspective, like, consumers are not as cautious about it as much as we hope them to be, or whether it be businesses or lack of knowledge or expertise, or whether it be government constraints. What do you think are the barriers?
I believe the main constraint is the competition coming from the legacy systems. We know that oil and gas is unsustainable since 1968.
Right.
But the oil and gas groups made sure that nobody would disrupt their business. Same goes for tobacco companies that for a long time had issued studies in the US saying that smoking was not harming your health.
Right.
When you switch to a different business model, there are winners, there are losers.
Right.
And those losers will make everything to make sure that things don't change. So I don't think it's a matter of regulation. I don't think it's a matter of consumer. It's a matter of who holds economic and political power,
right,
to hinder the progress of new technologies, because they would lose out to new competition.
Actually, what you said there is actually very interesting, because the world is not just about you see a problem, but then you take because I think this is a technocratic view. So my club a FinTech club consists of a lot of technology major students, and their problem-solving approach is, most of the time, if I see a problem, I develop something to kind of fix it. But perhaps that's not the way that it ideally works in the real world, right? Like there's a lot of, perhaps, I'm not sure if this word applies, but oligopolies trying to control the system in their favor so that it prevents progress in the sustainable development direction, right?
This is the case. That's why I say go to the government, because it's where decisions are actually made.
Right.
Under the pressure of businesses.
Right.
Innovation alone is not enough. Tesla had invented alternative current transmission power way before it was used.
Right.
We had electric cars, which we knew that were more efficient than internal combustion engines more than 130 years ago.
Right.
So it's really a matter of lobbying groups that are going for their interest. The fact that we have democratized information and capacity to share it more effectively accelerates the process of technological development and application. Nevertheless, there are decisions at the government level without which large industries will never develop. In Vietnam, we would have not had the feed-in tariffs of 2018-19, we would not have 25 gigawatts of electricity produced from wind and solar, putting Vietnam #1 in Southeast Asia as renewable energy producer.
Right.
The government has to incentivize the creation of these large industries, so it's a political decision more than technological readiness.
So I'm not sure if that's a depressing news or a very realistic view for a lot of the audience, but what do you say to or at least some in the audience who are the little guys who hear this information that most of the change happens at the big level, right? At the big leagues with the government and the giant companies controlling interest groups, etc., lobbying power, etc. What is the opportunity for the small guys, like the wannabe sustainable finance entrepreneurs? What's the opportunity for them to make change? Because I'm sure that not everyone wants to go into government. What's the chance for those who want to start something on their own?
Creating data availability is a great start.
Could you elaborate more?
There are governments that are less prone to be data-driven than others. Vietnam is certainly data-driven for the reasons we mentioned earlier.
Right.
So if you provide data, then you are making life a little more difficult on making choices of what is right, because then you need to benchmark what the right decision is on the basis of economics, on environmental protection, and societal equity, which are part of the law.
Right.
If you don't have this data, then anybody can just say, this is in the interest of the country, but there is no numbers upon which you can base this decision. So for now, the number one bottleneck for sustainable finance in all surveys, in all studies that you can find out there, is data availability. If you find a cool economic way to extract the data and provide them to financial institutions, you might be up for something very big that is even beyond building a unicorn. And I truly believe that the utility of the future is not in electricity, which is where I come from, is in data. If you are able to create the taxonomy of how data needs to be extracted, consolidated, provided to businesses, to governments, this is gonna make a huge difference for decision maker and businesses to carry out their activities.
Right. So I guess what you're suggesting then is data is everything in the 21st century. And if you're an entrepreneur looking to impact change, look for gaps in data availability and find a way to monetize it. And that would be the entrepreneurial route, right?
Correct. But let me be clear. Nobody wants to give you data, especially for free.
Right.
So you gotta figure out an incentive scheme where data comes to you and you can monetize the data.
Right. So that's the entrepreneurial perspective, but perhaps there's another path, which is to join non-government organizations, which I believe that's what EuroCham is, right? An NGO.
Yep.
So could you talk about your work in the EuroCham as a board member, and how have you personally worked with the government and impacted changes in whether it be sustainable finance or sustainable development?
Yeah.
Right.
So EuroCham is a chamber of commerce. It's an organization of private companies recognized by the government of Vietnam. Today, we are 1,300 members with 20 sector committees in different industries. And our duty is to advocate towards the Vietnamese government on policy advancement to ensure trade, particularly with the European Union. My work with these type of organizations spans from my Indonesia time. One experience has been to participate firsthand in the drafting of a law for the rural electrification in 2018. Here in Vietnam, I have been engaged with the government for the creation of the framework for the direct power purchase agreement that allows private companies to purchase renewable energy. To give you the context, today, if you are Lego or Nike or Adidas, you have in the target of the CEO to procure 100% of the electricity from renewable energy sources.
Right.
In Vietnam, we are still struggling to have the right system where a manufacturing company providing their goods to Nike can procure all the electricity from renewable energy sources. So we advise the government on what is needed to have these businesses continuing producing in Vietnam. Other things in sustainable finance are related to how do we classify sustainable economic activities, the so-called taxonomy, or how to incentivize the disclosure of data. As we said, nobody wants to pay taxes. Nobody wants to pay consultants in order to do a sustainability report. In Singapore, today, if you do your sustainability report with a tech company like AQUILA, the government pays 70% of the cost. It's a big incentive. Today, this doesn't exist in Vietnam, so we are advocating to the government on supporting corporates to do their sustainability report for the benefit of all.
So I kind of wanted to know what the experience of working with the government is like. So what's the most interesting aspect that you have observed your time working with government officials while being a member of EuroCham?
The most striking fact is that sometimes they lose touch from the real world because they are the regulator. They are dealing with the theory. Then the practice is only in the real world with businesses. So we help them to get closer to the real world of businesses. But the beauty of working in the government is that with a law, you affect the capacity of many people to live, not only businesses, citizens. So governments need to be considered still as a very cool place where to be, and certainly in Vietnam more than in other countries. What I have noticed is that we need to create more and more private-public cooperation structures, and EuroCham is one of them.
So one of the challenges that I personally see in Vietnam is that, and I think I'll just kind of tie in what you've mentioned before, which is you said a lot of businesses, they now have to care about sustainability reporting. But from the examples that you mentioned, it's the businesses that work on that deal with international business, so that works with the European Union. So they have to comply with sustainability standards in the European Union. In Vietnam, I know that there are frameworks as well, but I feel like it's, my assumption at least, is that it's only the big companies that care about it. What do you think about the vast majority of business structures, which are SMEs in Vietnam? My interpretation is they mostly don't care about sustainability at all. They just care about, okay, how do I make an extra living for an extra day, right? So as a business owner yourself, how would be your approach to tackling this issue? Because they make up the majority of businesses in Vietnam.
Correct. Although the economics of climate change and sustainability apply to large companies as much as to small, medium enterprises, which are actually the larger number employing the workforce as well as producing output in our economies. This is the reason why in most jurisdictions around the world, they are those following after big companies in their obligation for sustainability reporting. So in Singapore, this is already the case. SMEs are obliged to report, not only large companies. Same is in Europe, and very soon this will be the case in Vietnam as well. Naturally, the small medium enterprises have less resources to learn what to report, how to report, the technology available, the frameworks available. That's why more and more the government, if they want to pay less for the healthcare bill of people getting sick because of pollution, in order to avoid pollution, they have to invest a fraction of it in training and subsidizing SMEs to avoid the pollution, which starts with reporting, with measurement. It's a matter of economics, but eventually it's the government that needs to know where to allocate resources efficiently to allow also small, medium companies to be on the sustainability journey. And I must say, the most innovative one, even without the subsidies, are SMEs. And you have plenty in Vietnam with very cool examples. One is Cricket One that won the 𝗂𝗏 𝗏𝗏𝗏 Prize in Singapore last month. Many SMEs in Vietnam are innovating in terms of sustainability reporting, as well as management of different ESG risks and opportunities.
Right. So you mentioned a little bit about subsidies.
Yep.
Right. Actually, on my way to the podcast, I listened to a podcast. I don't think it was a podcast. I think it was a World Economic Forum interview. And I think there was a question that was asked, and it was framed of something like this, which is, increasingly, sustainable projects are being financed by the government through subsidies. But perhaps over the long run, it may not be as sustainable because debt levels increase. And so how do you see that? How do you see the balance between, the government issuing subsidies to sustainability financing projects and the increasing debt level, because you can't finance it forever with subsidies, right? So how do you see this problem from let's say from a government perspective, business perspective?
It depends on which sector are we in. If we talk about the energy sector, it's very different from FMCG.
Right.
Different sectors react to economic stimulus in different ways. Overall, in order to build new systems, you need subsidies to incentivize entrepreneurs to change course. So if you ask about the energy sector, today we don't have battery storage in Vietnam. If we want to have battery storage in Vietnam, we need subsidies to launch that. But after 5 years, it probably will not be required. In the same way as today is not required anymore to have subsidies in solar rooftop, which was required 3 years ago. In manufacturing of textile, if you want to really save water and pollute your rivers less, so that the farmers will have healthy crops and they will have healthy consumers of the crop, you may want as a government to incentivize the manufacturing companies to track and purify the water before it's discharged into rivers, which otherwise they wouldn't be doing otherwise. So it's a sectoral approach, and it's also a geographical approach, because geography really informs the availability of natural resources. In the Mekong, we have a lot of water. In Binh Thuan, we don't have water. So the economics of saving water in the two regions is completely different. So also there, the government needs to be skilled on understanding the geography and the economics of sustainable development, which are completely different. Saudi Arabia will never have a problem of oil availability. Vietnam has a problem of oil availability. Each country will have to deal with solutions with a view of their territory. Sustainable development, in fact, is not a global solution, it's a local solution. Each locality with different features and different problems and solutions.
So, Mr. Giando, I have the impression that you are a very busy man. You work in EuroCham as well as AQUILA. You manage, or AKA, you manage a business, but you also work with government officials to drive change in sustainable development. So with all of that hustle, what is the biggest impact that you want to leave on the growth of sustainable development worldwide or in Vietnam? I really want to hear that inspiration or that thing that you want to leave.
This podcast would be one step in the right direction, making people inspired on having fun, building businesses, and traveling the world, meeting people that are at the edge of technology and the economy, and curious minds that want to build new things. It's not much of a legacy, but rather having fun on the journey that I am seeking for, and I am blessed by having it. In terms of pragmatic results, it's building systems that are able to price externalities and having the real economy benefiting from this new technology and the financial system benefiting from these new methodologies, and make sure that here in Southeast Asia, with a young population, we can manage to build new businesses, new paradigm that we can export actually to the old world in Europe and the US. There is much more space to do these new things here than in the old world. So the aspiration would be to build a new type of utility here and make it the next thing in Europe.
So perhaps my last question then is, what do you think would be your advice to the next generation? What is your advice to a student? Perhaps either it could be still studying in school, in university, or being a fresh graduate. What's your advice to them who want to venture into the world of sustainable development or sustainable financing? Like, where should they start, and what kind of opportunities or things that they should pay attention to?
First of all, to document themselves on what is the practice of sustainable development, not only the theory of it, and talking to people, reaching out to businesses, to government officials, to influencers, to ask their opinion, and also make them accountable, because a lot of people are actually saying a lot of inexact things, using sustainability as a word for making things better, but is actually not the meaning of the word. So make sure that you associate yourself with the real people, not with the fools, and talk to them and extract as much information from them as you can. They are keen on sharing, and that's the best value you can take for free.
All right, that final question wraps up our podcast today with Mr. Giando. Mr. Giando, thank you so much for coming on to our podcast. And to be honest, I've learned a lot from you in the field of sustainable finance and from your perspectives in the business world, as well as working with government officials. And I hope that I have gained as much value, and I hope that the audience feels the same way as well. So this wraps up the third episode of FinTechTainment with Mr. Giando. Stay tuned for the next episode. My name is Yum. I'm your host, and we'll see you in the next one.